Hey guys, welcome back to Horse Tea Cinema. I know it's been quite a while since I've last uploaded on the channel, but I have a pretty good excuse for that this time, and that's that I've recently moved to London. So yeah, I'm doing a one-year master's program over here, and yeah, no, I've really been enjoying it so far, but just with the move and everything, and also my last few weeks in Colorado of anticipating the move, it's been quite hard to motivate myself to update, or to upload, I will say. But yeah, no, I definitely want to get back to regular uploads on the channel. So basically what I'm going to do today is another one of those like catch-up type reviews where I talk about a few films that I've seen recently. And then hopefully soon I'll be able to get back to more regular reviews, especially I've got some festival films coming up that I'm checking out here as well. So there are a few other recent films I've seen that I won't be covering in this video. Stuff like Guy Ritchie's The Covenant, The Pope's Exorcist, Heart of Stone, Blood and Gold. But I'll likely be bringing up the ones I liked anyway in my end of the year video, so definitely stay tuned for that as well. So the first film I want to talk about today is Bottoms, which is the new comedy film directed by Emma Seligman, who last directed the very successful independent film Shiva Baby. So this film is about a group of bullied high school girls who decide to team up and start a fight club for girls in the school, but they're really only doing it so that they can try and sleep with cheerleaders, basically. But this fight club starts to become really popular, and the two main leads realize that they're really in over their heads in this situation. So I actually saw this film before going back and checking out Shiva Baby, Seligman's very successful, again, debut feature. And while I did like that film, and I found aspects of it really darkly funny, and I think it really kind of established her as a unique voice in cinema, I do think aspects of it, especially for me, felt quite derivative of other contemporary greats like the Safdie brothers, for example. For me, though, Bottoms was a really big improvement as a second feature. In terms of like the specifics of why I liked it, I don't know how much I actually have to say about it, but really just the biggest compliment I can give this film is that it is hands down the funniest film I've seen this year. I don't want to give too many jokes away or anything like that, but I will say that the tone of the film overall is really refreshing for a comedy. The tone of the comedy itself is very surreal, which is something that you don't often see these days. The world that the characters live in, while it has that very familiar high school comedy structure, it definitely lacks a lot of the rules of logic that often can ruin those kind of comedies for me. I would just say in that sense of lacking, logic in a good way, it reminds me of something like Airplane, for example, or even something much more recent like Wet Hot American Summer, that kind of surreal tone to it. The cast is really excellent, of course. I mean, Rachel Sennett is somebody who I'll watch pretty much anything she's in. Even in stuff where I don't really like the film, like Bodies, 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 I tend to think that she's really good in her films. Ayo Edebiri is also great, as is the supporting cast, which includes, and I never thought I would say this sentence, but Marshawn Lynch. Beast Mode himself is in this movie. This is a little pet peeve of mine, is like whenever movies try and cast professional athletes especially in comedy roles, I just often find that they're not very good at line delivery, and it just comes off as kind of lame appeal to the masses. But I don't know. I don't know his background or anything in theater or whatever, but he really makes the role work here. He honestly has some of the funniest line deliveries in the entire film. My only real issue with the film is that especially the latter half adds a lot of sentimentality, which, while it's very competently done, it does feel a little bit easy and not quite earned for me. It just felt a little bit obligatory, and it kind of took me out of the really refreshing tone that the film was going for most of the runtime. So yeah, especially towards the end, it gets a little bit too sentimental for my liking, but I don't know how much I really care about that, just given how much I laughed over the very brisk 90-minute runtime. So yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this. This is definitely my favorite comedy that's come out this year. I'm going to give this one a solid 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. Next, I'm going to talk about the film No One Will Save You, which is a new sci-fi sort of horror film, which is directed by Brian Duffield. And it also stars Caitlin Dever, who is best known for Booksmart. This one's about a young woman who at first seems happily reclusive in her community, but she finds her home invaded by strange extraterrestrial beings one night. And these aliens represent an obvious physical threat to her, but they also force her to confront events from her past that may indicate a very dark relationship that she has with the community. So one thing I do want to note about this film, if you haven't seen it yet, is that it pretty much has no dialogue. It's not a silent film. I mean, there's a lot going on in the way of sound design, but it's rather sparse in terms of actual dialogue, for reasons that become more clear as the film goes on. Yeah, so for the most part, I thought this was a pretty good mid-budget sci-fi film, especially ones that, you know, come directly to streaming. Yeah, and it very competently riffs on movies I like a lot, like Signs, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and definitely A Quiet Place, given that, you know, it's very sparse in dialogue in that way. The inciting set piece of the film and the subsequent ones are directed pretty well, I would say. They do a good job at sort of misdirecting audience expectations and building up suspense. I will say, though, the pacing of the film overall does feel a little bit uneven for me, because on one hand, it's almost aggressively fast in how quickly it reveals its genre elements, like the alien stuff, which is in the description, so I don't feel like it's too big of a spoiler. But at the same time, the gimmick of the film of really not having hardly any dialogue at all, that going on for, you know, a 90+ minute runtime, I feel like it does kind of harm the pacing a little bit, especially when it comes to character development. So like A Quiet Place, the gimmick of the film, you know, it's a very good excuse to just kind of direct the movie really well and focus on the set pieces. But at the same time, it is quite limiting in terms of character, and it's really the character stuff that makes a film like Signs work for me, for example, when you really kind of feel the emotional weight of what these characters are going through in the face of these very dire circumstances. The final twist of the film, I think, is a really neat revelation, and it does tie into the central character's relationship with the town in an interesting way that I didn't totally expect. But at the same time, it just didn't really feel that developed. It just felt like it kind of tacked on by the end. But, you know, if this is the kind of movie that we're going to get that sort of is going to riff on the recent success of Nope, for example, in this sort of horror sci-fi vein, I'm not going to complain too much. I honestly enjoyed this quite a bit. Especially towards the end, there is a lot of really creative creature design in terms of the alien, very much like Nope, but in a very different way. I honestly thought a little bit more about Lovecraftian creatures, stuff like Color Out of Space, or even a little bit something like Annihilation. Yeah, it's just got a really good tone to it overall. I mean, it's definitely the kind of thing that I could picture M. Night Shyamalan doing some kind of version of, and people hating because it's very sincere, but I don't know. For the most part, I think this worked for me. So I'm going to give it the 3 for now. It's, you know, it's definitely got its issues, but overall, I really enjoyed it, especially for streaming films that have come out this year. And finally, I'm going to be talking about a very straightforward drama called Passages. This was directed by Ira Sachs and stars 3 very talented actors, Ben Whishaw, Franz Rogowski, and Adele Exarchopoulos. So the film is about a German filmmaker in contemporary Paris. His name is Thomas, and the film is basically about him developing an extramarital affair with this young woman named Agathe that puts a strain on the relationship that he has with his husband, Martin. And when Martin begins an extramarital affair of his own, he gains back his husband Thomas's attention, but at the same time he increases his jealousy. And the film is really about Thomas sort of confronting these emotions and the confines of his relationship. So before I get into the specifics of this one, I do want to say that I saw this film in really good conditions. One thing that I really love about being in London so far is not only the just the sheer amount of great independent films you can just go see anywhere, but also, I mean, the fact that a lot of these movies are actually shown on film sometimes. I mean, in certain circumstances, I was able to see Passage on a 35mm print, and it looked gorgeous. So yeah, I was pretty impressed by Passages overall. I think it is a pretty solid character study. I really, really like the way it frames the central character, Thomas. We see kind of how he plays different people in his lives, sort of like pawns. It's very manipulative the way he interacts with them a lot of the time, but at the same time we can certainly sympathize with his point of view to some extent. And I think a lot of the reason that this character is humanized and that we can sympathize with him is really just due to the amazing performance by Rogowski. He has this very quiet way of playing the character, which is interesting for a character that is so, you know, manipulative. He's not playing it like Adam Sandler in Uncut Gems, for example. It's a very quiet, reserved performance. And because we see this array of flaws, you know, his manipulative nature, his naivete, we do really get to sympathize with him, because we see him as more or less a fully fleshed out three-dimensional character that we can sort of look at and project onto people that we know in our own lives. But while the character of Thomas is really good, I do think the film probably would have benefited from really fleshing out some of the other secondary characters in the film, especially Agathe and Martin. I did have a lot of empathy for these characters, especially in their responses to Thomas's manipulation. But I think that this empathy comes more just from the general situation that they're in, as opposed to the film, the film's writing really making me understand them as people. I just don't really feel like I understand them outside of their relationships. Occasionally we see bits of their jobs. I think Ben Wishaw's character is an artist of some kind, and Agathe is a teacher, but we don't really see that much of their passion for their jobs or for any other aspects of their personal lives outside of this weird love triangle situation. Ben Wishaw's character does have, that other extramarital affair of his own, but again, I don't really feel like it's developed to the point where we really get to know him as a character. And similarly, though Thomas, I think, is a much more well-drawn character, I found it a little interesting that he's a filmmaker, just like the director of the film, of course, but at the same time, we don't really get to see Thomas, the filmmaker. I mean, the opening scene is him on set, and he is, very he's quite angry at some of the people, some of the actors specifically, but it's really all we get. Throughout the rest of the film, we don't really get any of his perspective into his, creativity or his filmmaking perspective. We don't really see how his artistic point of view affects his life and the relationships within his life, which I do think really could have benefited the film. It would have been interesting if, given that he's a director, if, we can kind of see more examples of his work on set, we can maybe parallel it to the way that he's manipulating the real people in his life, not just these actors on set. But my criticisms of the writing aside, I do think that this is a very well done film, especially I mentioned earlier that I saw a print of it. It is gorgeously shot, really, really well done cinematography, and it's brilliantly acted, of course, by all three of the main characters and the supporting cast. I just didn't feel quite as emotionally connected to it as I wanted to be, just because of those criticisms I have of the writing. So yeah, I'm gonna give this a 3 stars as well. I think it's a very solid drama that everybody should check out. I just wish I connected to it a little bit more than I did. But yeah, that's my review. Thank you guys so much for watching this. I know it's been a while since I've posted, but I'm definitely looking forward to posting more. I've got more videos coming up soon. I actually, so I have 4 films to see at the London Film Festival. I'll probably do a recap on all 4. One of them I've already seen, which is David Fincher's The Killer, which I'm super excited to talk about on the channel, so definitely stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya!